Hello and welcome to this week's edition of More Insights and Strategy, the Enterprise App Podcast. We're on episode 10. I'm Robert Kramer, VP and Principal Analyst, and I'm joined by Melody Brue. She's also VP and Principal Analyst. I handle ERP and enterprise data. Mel handles modern work, HCM, CX. On the show, we'll talk about the tools, the trends, the trajectories in people and marketing technologies, enterprise apps, ERP, CRM, and the glue that holds it all together. We talk about it all the time, the data. So this week, we're going to talk about Oracle and supply chain management, Salesforce and agent observability, changes in the data protection space, and what's coming up next. Quick disclaimer, then we'll jump into it. This show is for information and entertainment purposes only. While we will discuss publicly traded companies on the show, its content should not be taken as investment advice. So, Mel, how are we doing today? It's been, a couple of weeks. We're back in it. It's almost the weekend. It's exciting. It's a little hot
Yeah.
outside. But what's going on with you? And what should we talk about first? We got a lot too.
We do. We have a lot to talk about, and yeah, it's been a couple of weeks. Everybody's been on the road. I was at Cisco Live in San Diego, then to Orlando for Infocom, and I know you've been back and forth to San Francisco a couple of times, various things. So then we had the 6.5 Summit, which was great, and all of those videos are now on demand. If anybody missed the 6.5 Summit. There's a lot of good stuff to talk about there. But so there's a lot going on right now in the world of enterprise apps. But I think, starting with this study that originally came out of MIT and since then has really been kind of looked at in a number of ways, even from Microsoft, which is is the rise of generative AI in knowledge workers impacting critical thinking skills? And there's been a number of studies that show that first-hand examples of using Gen AI in work tasks that quantitatively, when considering both tasks and user-specific factors, users' confidence in the tools and confidence in their critical thinking really impact how they're using AI and very much how they're using critical thinking towards information verification, response integration, task stewardship. So there's a lot of this where I think I saw somebody on LinkedIn call it the Gen AI tax. It's like our brains are getting lazy, essentially, if we're relying too much on Gen AI. And I think that makes a lot of sense. It's like I heard this example a couple of years ago at South by Southwest of people no longer know how to use maps. Remember when we used to print out a map, or we had a map in the car that was that's how we figured out how to go
AAA, where you do
places?
the thing where you every 15, 20 miles, you push the thing over. Do you remember those trip things that they would get? I don't know if you remember that. That's
Oh, yeah,
old school.
like the Garmin thing or whatever. But yeah, I mean, we
No,
had paper
before that,
maps.
it was a piece of paper. It was you go in the AAA, you tell them where you're going, and they would print
Oh,
off.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, a piece of
before
paper.
Garmin.
And then we have GPS. So now I'm guilty of this too. For a long time when I first moved to Austin, I didn't know how to get anywhere because I just relied on my GPS.
Yeah.
Well, what if you then don't have your GPS? Are you starting to lose that kind of spatial ability to figure out where you are, what's east, west, which is harder for me in Texas than it is in California, where I'm like, the ocean, clearly that's west. I know which way I'm going. But I think it shows that we have to really be conscious of what tools we're using for what and making sure that we're sort of exercising that part of our brain. One of the things that came out of this MIT study was that when people heavily rely on Gen AI for their writing, they remember less of what the output was.
Without a
So
doubt.
it makes total sense, right? So that kind of critical thinking, we've got to make sure that our brains are staying sharp. And I think it's a very real thing that we have to be super aware of doing what I think many companies are trying to use Gen AI 4, which is augmenting the worker, not replacing or not even replacing your work necessarily, but automating those things that are, really kind of mundane things that we don't actually need to be using our brain. I love Bill McDermott's term of the soul crushing work. But we still have to be using that critical thinking that is becoming, I would say it's a very unique human characteristic, but with all of these deep reasoning models, that critical thinking isn't becoming solely a human thing. And so it's that kind of the intuition and the things that are very critically human activities that we need to, keep our brains sharp for.
Well, it's interesting because I know we were going to do an episode on in the scholastic area of how AI is used for students. And as I
Mhm.
teach as a professor at a university, how far do I let the students go with AI where they're not learning the actual material? And so it's this discussion that we will have in the future. But I think there is a critical factor there that if you use AI too much, you won't learn the material. And I think that's an important discussion. But at the same time, the person who's doing the work has to own that responsibility because they got to be able to learn. And I mean, you gave some good examples, even with travel and how you rely on Garmin or GPS or different things instead of learning the route and understanding the city. I mean, your brain needs to be able to still work, but yeah, I think it's
Mhm.
very important to understand what you just said because it's going to go too far where you're not going to understand what you're writing, or what you're talking about or writing about, or in school because of the fact that you're not using your brain enough. So you have to understand the material. You can't. I always say it's kind of like a math equation. You have to understand how 8 times 8 is 64, not just memorizing it. You have to learn it. So this is kind of like a math equation too with Gen AI that you can't just rely on it. You have to understand the math of the technology or what you're doing, so you're not just relying on just input from or exporting the information.
Right.
So
And it really is a matter of it's like exercising your muscles, right? It's not just are you learning the thing, are you recalling the information, but they actually used EEGs to record brain activity and assess like cognitive engagement and cognitive load to understand like the neural activations during these tasks. And you can see that there's people are using their brains differently. They picked up different connectivity patterns in the brain so that our brains will turn to mush if we're not careful. I mean, that's kind of a reactionary response, but it really is that it is a pressing matter that we've got to kind of keep our learning skills sharp and our brain activity. That neural connectivity requires rewiring, and
yeah,
it's not something that you just will get back. So we don't want that's one thing, in education. I certainly want my kids to understand how to use AI, how to use it wisely, but also I don't want their brain atrophying. So,
absolutely true. So as we move on, how AI is used, we talk a little bit here about Oracle and the supply chain management and some of the things that they've recently have released. I wrote a recent research paper on Oracle and the Fusion Cloud supply chain uh, man, management, excuse me. And what's interesting is why do we need a modern supply chain? What's so interesting about that? Because traditionally, supply chains have been more reactive, where they're just able to diffuse a situation, but they're not really able to handle disruptions before they happen. And so the modern supply chain will be able to do that. And Oracle's and amongst other companies have something similar, but they're able to have a modern supply chain. And this really is important because it takes advantage of AI, takes advantage of supply and demand changes and disruptions that you might have. It could be weather, it could be global economy issues or wars or vendor issues or a bunch of different things. But outdated systems won't be able to respond. And I've always said this. I think that in the world of production companies and logistics companies and ones that are moving materials, it's important because costs are so high to be able to save money or be efficient in this area because of the fact that you're not going to be able to handle all these disruptions manually. So a lot of companies have been working on similar and taking advantage of this. And so I'm really excited to share this report that I just did from Oracle for Oracle. Thoughts on that?
We will. Oh boy, there's a dog barking. So gotta love the live live broadcast. I'm gonna let you start the next topic so I can get the dog to start barking.
No problem. So why don't we jump into a little bit on Salesforce just released a new version, and it deals with their agent observability, and I think it's something that's important because it deals with how advanced they're getting from a governance perspective. What's your thoughts on that? I know this is something that you wanted to talk about, so I'm going to kind of throw it back to you. I'm not really an expert on their stuff right now, but what's your thoughts?
Well, hopefully I won't have a dog barking. I don't know if you can hear that, but
Yep, we got it.
okay.
Uh,
So, yeah, I think so. In general, this is something we actually, when we were at ServiceNow Knowledge, we saw ServiceNow announce this AI control tower. I think it's really important as we start to see like this major surge in AI agent usage. There has to be an observability solution that manages these agents. Think about if every company is going to be using thousands, if not millions, in some estimates, agents to be part of this digital workforce. There's so much that goes into that. It means that these agents have to be monitored. They cannot just fly blind. You've got to have like this whole, from how is the agent set up? Like, is that like an HR function? Like you're hiring a person, who do you go to build the right agent for you for the tasks that you need? Then you need, how are these agents performing? Are they delivering accuracy? Are they taking the right, time for iteration? If you don't know where the agent is, you don't know how to correct it. If you don't know,
yeah.
these agents need to be treated like employees, essentially. They've got to be the command center type of approach, like Salesforce has just introduced. It provides this insight into agent performance with analytics for error rates, escalation frequency, agent latency. This is very much the same thing that we saw, not the same thing, but very much similar to what we saw at ServiceNow, which I think is so important that we've got to be able to look, and from a command center perspective of customer service, you need case volume, you need deflection rate, you need all of the, average score tags, like tag scores. All of this stuff is so important. You can't just sort of leave that out there and hope that somebody in your BI team can take a look at how these agents are performing. They need to be treated like their human counterparts and have their KPIs and make sure that they're delivering to those. And so these solutions provide a way to do that. And with the number of agents that companies are deploying and talking about deploying, this is super important. So this is part of Salesforce Agentforce 3, their new version of Agentforce. And I think it sets a lot of good visibility to scale these hybrid agent human workforces.
What's also important is how they use MCP, which is the Model Context Protocol. And a couple other companies I've been talking with, especially Microsoft, of how it's a foundational part of of this architecture for Agent Force, which is how the agents actually interact together and enable standardization for AI. And so by using the standard protocol, it's similar to what other companies are doing versus doing their own protocols that's not standard. So I think that's kind of an important piece of this that they're able to do. Um, but yeah, I think it's critical to have some observability advanced continually for Salesforce and other companies because of the fact that we're able to rely on this being, what it is. Um,
Yeah.
what do you
And
think the end result is, though, for what they're trying to do? Like, what are they catching that you think is important? Is it trust? Is it security? Is it governance? Is it
it's all of those
compliance?
things.
Yeah,
It is, I mean, being able to automate those workflows, you have to be able to manage the risk, you have to measure the impact, and it needs to be in real time. So they you really what it should do, and same thing for the ServiceNow AI Control Tower, is it should help with streamlining those operations by aligning the AI agents with the enterprise strategy instead of just being like, well, I think this agent can do this one task that nobody wants to do. So
right.
managing that risk and compliance, especially with regulated industries, you've got to watch, what permissions are you giving these agents? When these agents start to have interoperability and talk to each other, how are you managing that? How are you giving them access to, say, financial data that they need to run a model that maybe a human isn't needed at the time, not that they won't be needed at some point, because I think there's still both companies are sort of advocating for a human in the loop, but you still have to grant these agents the accessibility to sensitive data. And so
Right.
this is a place that they can embed this security so that the agents can operate semi-autonomously, at least for now. And it takes away a lot of the risk. I wouldn't say it removes it entirely, but it takes away a lot of the risks. So that's, I think this is a great lead into our next topic, which is data protection. And I would say a lot of this has changed. It's not just about data protection. It's not just about data security anymore. It's about resiliency across the
Yep.
organization. And so, yeah, you
True.
wrote a research note on that, and specifically on healthcare data, which I think that's another thing that has become so crucial, which is verticalizing um, these applications, because they're different. They're different for healthcare and they're different for financial services than they are for retail. And so these different verticals, I think it's time, and it's happening, that enterprises are really paying attention to the specific needs of verticals. So let's talk about your healthcare data security research note.
Yeah. So I think at the same time, like you just mentioned, like the industries, there's a convergence of identity protection and data protection, and also IoT data, which is the healthcare information, and like you mentioned, like how things are happening. It's really interesting. For cyber attacks are just they're increasing, and they're attacking identity, they're attacking IoT data, they're attacking all different sorts. So in 2024, there was an enormous amount of data breaches specifically for patient records. I think it was like over 300 million. But Commvault actually has a solution that goes beyond the comprehensive just cyber resiliency, which you talked about, but actually for medical devices and that endpoint protection. But they also, I recently wrote an article about how they're taking steps to prepare for the quantum era. So as we go through all this identity and this data, protection needs, there's a quantum issue, which quantum is able to fast forward a lot of this data problems because of the fact they're able to kind of go into the the issues that the vulnerability, and so by post quantum cryptographic protection that they put into their platform, which uses specific standards to help with quantum error correcting, etc. They're able to put this into their platform as well. So the quantum I think is moving from theory to reality as well. And organizations are now they're able to, or they should be rethinking their data strategies, identity, quantum, endpoint, the resiliency. I think it's going to the point where the data protection is a huge part of the world needed for these organizations. Thoughts on your end on that?
Yeah, I feel like every analyst event that we've been to recently is they're talking about the kind of quantum ready future,
Yep.
and where that is in the future is kind of unknown at this point, right? Because we look at things and we say that, well, that's 5 years out. Well, that we were saying that 6 months ago, and now people are saying we might be 12 months out. We might be, because the acceleration of these technologies is happening so fast that that was a big thing at Cisco Live 2 weeks ago, is really talking about this quantum ready protection.
Yep.
And there's a lot of, I love actually, anybody who's watching, who listens, should look at some of the things that Paul from our team has written on quantum, way over my head in many, many ways. But he does a great job of explaining the risks, but also the rewards, what quantum can do for us in terms of healthcare, all of the great things it can do to expedite the curing disease, the number of things it can do. But I know in a lot of our financial services clients, there's a massive focus on preparing these financial institutions to be quantum safe. At the same time, they're looking at how do they use quantum for their benefit. The speed of computing to make trades that are instant, that they don't have to then justify on the processing of. So there's, I think, lots of great things that this could bring to society and to enterprise, and also things that now people have to be really aware of that maybe they didn't think were in our near future.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think between preparing yourself, these companies, for quantum, for identity, for data, I think it's one of those things that, like you just mentioned, that there's just so much to think about and prepare yourself. That's why I think companies have to be very cautious on what they add to their technology stack and why it's needed, because of the fact all the bad actors can get in, and quantum is one of those that could be accelerated because of the fact of what it's able to do. But at the same time, if you don't have the protection for this, it's going to be a large problem, because to remediate these breaches, I think it's over 4 to 5 million as a standard from a remediation perspective to actually get back to normal. So I I think that companies should really think about what they add from a technology stack. And it's one of those things we talk about all the time, like how far do you go with what you need in your technology stack, and is it needed? Because I don't think some of these companies think about the security issues that it brings, and that's why it's very you have to be very thorough with what you decide to go with. Anyway,
Mhm.
so moving on, unless you have anything else on that.
No, I was just going to say, I think we're kind of at the wrap up point, but what do you have coming up next? Where are you off
Coming
to?
up
Or
next, I just a lot of good research papers. We have some things on some of our, we have a Game Time Tech, which is dealing with a sustainability in the sports area. I'm working on some database things as well, research papers, also with data integration is another topic, and also ERP. So, and modernization, we're relying on that. What about you? You're hitting the road this afternoon?
well, yeah, I hit the road this afternoon for a baseball tournament. That's my second job as a semi full time baseball mom. Have a kid who plays travel ball, who hit a big, massive home run yesterday that you
Big
saw.
time.
It was massive, over the fence home run. So go, Trevor. Um, but yeah, we head to Arizona today for a baseball tournament, and then I come back and I'm off to Europe, and I will be doing a little game time tech activity there. Also taking a little bit of time off. I come back and I go to Zoom Perspectives, which is their yearly analyst conference. having a visit with Adobe, and then I think we get a little tiny bit of a travel break for the summer, which, it's nice to have that time off the road and really kind of sink into all of the things that we've picked up along the way over the last crazy couple of months. I have some research I'm working on. Microsoft has put out some really interesting data on what they're calling the infinite workday, how basically our workday just doesn't have a start or a stop. And this is somewhat because of hybrid work. It's somewhat because we're now working globally. We've got people in different time zones all the time, but there's a major capacity in how people are working and able to manage all of that work, and whether AI is actually helping that or if it's going to make it even harder to manage. So I'm doing some pretty deep research on that, which I'll be publishing, and there's a lot of good things that are coming along. So
one quick thing. So what are we both doing for 4th of July? Let's get a little personal here so people know what, a little bit about us. Anything fun that you're going to be doing?
Well, I leave for Europe on the 5th, but we do have at the, I live in a golf course and lake community, and we have fireworks and live music and barbecue and everything planned for that. And I do have a 5th of July baby, so I've always taught my kids that the 4th of July, or I tricked them into thinking that the 4th of July was really about Trevor's birthday. Now they're old enough to know that it's not. So we have, that's just what our family's up to. What about you guys?
That sounds like a lot of fun. So we live by the ocean. I have a buddy coming in town, someone that I actually was roommates with when I lived in London. We went
Oh,
to
fun.
school there, and yeah, he lives in Boston. He's coming in town. He likes to visit. I live in Virginia Beach, so we are going to do some kayaking in the ocean and do some barbecuing by our outside pool, and just kind of enjoy life. And hopefully, it won't be too hot. I think it's supposed to get about 10 degrees cooler next week, but we should hopefully have a good time. I'm excited about that. So
Well, I will be thinking about you not being too hot when I'm in Arizona in 110-degree weather. So
it's a tough
with
one.
that, I will wrap this up. Thank you for joining us, everybody who has come along for the ride with us. If you like what you saw, please hit subscribe. Make sure you comment, ask us any questions, tell us what you like, what you didn't like. And I guess you know what, we missed our disclaimer. This is for entertainment purposes only. Do not take any of what we say as investment advice. And with that, have a wonderful 4th of July weekend, and we will see you after the holiday again. Take care.